It's funny how life works. You think the defining moments, the ones that actually shift your trajectory, are going to be these cinematic explosions. You expect a massive argument, or a winning lottery ticket, or a storm. But in my experience, it's usually a Tuesday. Just a regular, boring Tuesday where you're completely off guard. Before we dive into the story, do me a huge favor. Check that subscribe button, make sure it's clicked, and drop a like on the video. It seems small, but it's the engine that keeps this channel running. It lets me keep sitting here with you, talking about the messy, weird, beautiful reality of being human. Alright, let's get to it. I want to share a story about a quiet evening that completely rewired my family. It didn't start with a tragedy, and it didn't start with a celebration. Strangely enough, it started with a moment of absolute, toe-curling humiliation that forced us to finally look each other in the eye. Let me set the scene. It was late in the afternoon on a humid summer day. I had just dragged myself home after a grueling bike ride. My legs felt like jelly, my lungs were burning, and I had been caught in a sudden thunderstorm about 2 miles from home. I was soaked to the bone, muddy, and exhausted. My brain had shut off. All I could think about was the promise of hot water. I unlocked the front door and walked in. The house felt sterile. It wasn't just quiet, it was brittle. See, we lost my uncle about 2 years ago. He was the glue, the guy with the loud laugh and the terrible jokes who filled every room he entered. When he passed, the house went dormant. My aunt, my cousin, and I were all living under the same roof, but we were like ghosts passing in the hallway. We were polite, sure. We said good morning and passed the salt, but we weren't connecting. We were just surviving in the silence. Thinking I had the place to myself, or that everyone was locked away in their rooms, I didn't bother announcing my arrival. I dropped my muddy gear by the door, grabbed a clean towel from the linen closet, and headed straight for the shower. That shower was spiritual. The steam filled up the bathroom, and for 20 minutes, I wasn't the grieving nephew or the housemate walking on eggshells. I was just warm. I stood there letting the water hammer the exhaustion out of my shoulders. Eventually, I turned the faucet off. The silence of the house came rushing back in instantly. I dried off quickly, wrapped the towel around my waist, probably a little too loosely, and stepped out into the hallway. I was completely in my own world, maybe even humming a little tune, thinking I was alone. I turned the corner toward the living room to grab a water bottle I'd left on the table, and then full stop. My heart didn't just skip a beat. It stopped cold. Sitting on the sofa, right in my line of sight, were my aunt and my cousin. They were going through some old photo albums, and they both looked up at the exact same moment. It wasn't just that I was standing there half naked. It was the shock of it. The raw vulnerability. When you think you're alone, your face is slack, your guard is down. To be seen like that, so unpolished and exposed, is a nightmare. I stood there, frozen like a statue, dripping water onto the hardwood. They stared. I stared. The air in the room was so thick you could have choked on it. I managed to stammer something unintelligible, clutched the towel like it was a lifeline, and practically moonwalked back into the hallway before sprinting into my bedroom and locking the door. I slumped against the wood, heart pounding against my ribs, face burning with heat. I kept telling myself, it's fine. It's just a funny accident. We'll joke about it tomorrow. But we didn't joke. Not immediately. For the next few days, the vibe in the house was heavy. It was awkward. If I walked into the kitchen, my cousin would suddenly remember she had to be somewhere else. My aunt kept her eyes on her coffee cup. It felt like that one split second of embarrassment had highlighted just how disconnected we really were. We were strangers sharing a zip code, terrified of breaking the silence. Just when I thought I was going to lose my mind from the tension, the dam finally cracked. I was in my room a few nights later, trying to drown out the silence with some music, when my door opened. It was my cousin. She stood there, leaning against the frame, looking at me with a weird expression. Usually, she'd just wave or text me, but she stayed put. Then, she cracked a smile, a genuine, teasing smirk I hadn't seen since before her dad died. "You really know how to make an entrance," she said dryly. I froze for a second, and then the absurdity of it hit me. I burst out laughing, a nervous, relieved laugh. She walked in and sat on the edge of my desk. We started joking about how terrified I looked, but then the conversation deepened. We started talking about how weird things had been, about how much we missed the noise. For the first time in 2 years, the wall between us crumbled just a little bit. That night was the spark. But the real fire started a few days later. It was late, past midnight. I went to the kitchen for a glass of milk and found my aunt sitting at the table in the dark. She looked drained. Not just tired from the day, but tired in her soul. She didn't mention the towel incident. She just looked up at me and whispered, "We stopped making noise when he left, didn't we?" It hit me like a ton of bricks. It wasn't an accusation. It was a realization. She started talking about my uncle. For 2 years, we had treated his name like a forbidden word, afraid that saying it would shatter us. But that night, she told me how he would have roared with laughter at my hallway blunder. She said he would have teased me about it for weeks. And that's when I understood. That humiliating moment hadn't pushed us apart. It had shocked us back to life. It reminded us that we are human, that we are messy, and that pretending to be perfect, silent statues wasn't healing us. It was killing us. The embarrassment was the bridge back to each other. From that night on, the house began to thaw. It wasn't instantaneous. We didn't wake up the next day as a perfect TV family. But the suffocating silence lifted. We started eating dinner at the same time. The sound of forks scraping plates was replaced by actual voices. My cousin and I started roasting each other again. My aunt started listening to the radio while she cooked. Then came the moment that sealed the deal. A week later, I was sitting on the back porch watching the sunset. My cousin came out and sat next to me. The light was fading, turning everything gold and purple. "Do you ever get scared you'll forget what he sounded like?" she asked softly. I put my phone down. "All the time," I admitted. I try to replay his voice in my head, and sometimes it's static. It terrifies me. "Me too," she said, and I saw a tear slide down her cheek. We sat there and cried. Not the hidden, solitary crying we'd been doing for years, but shared grief. We let it out into the open air. We told stories, we mimicked his bad advice, and we connected over the hole he left behind. We realized we were all swimming in the same ocean of grief, but we had refused to grab the life raft of each other's company. That awkward, cringe-worthy moment in the hallway, it forced us to stop looking away. It forced us to be present. So, what's the lesson here? What did I learn from a muddy bike ride and a towel mishap? I learned that we spend so much energy trying to be composed. We try to hold it together to avoid the messy parts of life. But sometimes, the mess is exactly what we need. Awkward moments aren't failures. They're interruptions. They break the trance of routine. They force you to wake up. Grief and life in general isn't about dodging the potholes. It's about falling into them and letting the people who love you help pull you out. We had been trying to survive the loss individually, but healing is a team sport. That ordinary Tuesday, with the rain and the fatigue and the embarrassment, it wasn't just a bad day. It was the day we decided to be a family again. So look at your own life. Are you holding your breath? Is there a wall of silence in your home? Maybe you don't need to streak through the hallway to fix it, though, hey, it worked for me, but maybe you need to embrace the awkwardness. Say the thing that feels heavy. Laugh at your own mistakes. Break the silence before it breaks you. Life is too short to be a stranger in your own home. If this story resonated with you, if it made you think about the walls you might have built, do me a favor. Hit that like button right now. Share this with someone, maybe a family member you haven't really spoken to in a while. And of course, make sure you're subscribed. We have so many more stories to tell and so many more lessons to figure out together. Thanks for listening. Remember, sometimes the most beautiful changes come wrapped in the most awkward packages. I'll catch you in the next one.